Hello and welcome back. In this lecture we are going to install the DHCP server role and make our domain controller also a DHCP server. Go to Server Manager. Click on Manage, Add Roles and Features. Click Next. Since this is the only server, it's already selected, click Next, select the DHCP server role. Click on Add Features as we will need these tools to manage the server. Click Next. Click Install. It has finished installing. Click on Close. Now click on this yellow triangle as there are a couple more steps to complete the DHCP setup. Now it tells us that two groups will be created to manage the DHCP role on this server. The DHCP users group will have a read-only access and the DHCP administrators group will give you full permission to manage this DHCP server. Click Next. During this step we need to authorize this DHCP server in our Active Directory. This provides additional protection from unwanted Windows DHCP servers on the network. We will use the credentials we are currently logged in with to authorize this DHCP server. Click on Commit. Here you can see that both steps were finished successfully. Now we can close this window. At this point we can go to the DHCP snap-in and see what options we can configure on our server. Type DHCP in the Start menu and click on the DHCP icon. Here is our DHCP server, click on this arrow to expand it. As you can see, we can configure options for both IPv4 and IPv6. In this lecture we will focus solely on IPv4. Expand the IPv4 folder. Let's create a new scope. Right-click on the IPv4 icon and select New Scope. Click Next. Give it a name. Put something in the description. Click Next. Here we get to specify the range of IP addresses for our scope. I will start my scope at 192.168.2.101 and end at 192.168.2.200. I will keep the subnet mask at /24, click Next. Here are some insights, keep your ranges consistent. Couple of best practices, use the first usable IP address in the range for your gateway and lower portion of the range for devices with static IP addresses. This will make it easier to manage your networks as they grow. Here we can add an exclusion range. For instance, we might have some computers or printers with static IPs in this range and we don't want those addresses to be assigned to other devices on the network. Just as an example, I will exclude 192.168.2.151 to 192.168.2.160. Click Next. Here we can set the lease duration. This option specifies how long a device will keep the given IP address before going back to the server and asking for renewal. I will leave the default value. In case you had a network with a lot of different devices constantly connecting and disconnecting such as wireless, you would probably want to reduce the lease time to ensure you don't run out of available IP addresses. Click Next. Here we can configure other DHCP server options. You can go through the wizard now or do it later. Let's do it now. Select Yes, I want to configure these options now, click Next. Here you get to specify your default gateway. In my case it is 192.168.2.1, click Add, click Next. In the next window we can specify our DNS server. Our DNS server is our domain controller, which is now also a DHCP server. It's already been added, so we can click Next. WINS is an obsolete implementation for resolving NetBIOS names, and it is recommended by Microsoft itself to use DNS instead unless you have a good reason to still keep it. I have no need for WINS on my network, so I'll leave it blank and click Next. The last step is to activate the newly created scope. Click Next and there it is. We just configured a new scope with basic options. Let's take a look at our scope. Expand the scope folder. In the address pool folder, you can see the range for distribution we created along with the exclusion range. Let's go to the address leases folder. As you can see, there are no leases yet as we just created this scope. You will see leases once new devices start joining your network. I will change IP settings on our Windows 11 VM from static to DHCP, and we should see a lease for it here. For that I will use the ipconfig/renew command. Okay, our IP changed. Let's go back to our DHCP console. Here it is. In here we can add reservations. In case you need to assign a specific IP address to a device but you don't want to do it statically on the device itself, you can make a reservation for it here and have that device always using the same IP. It is pretty useful, especially for mobile devices. Let's create a new reservation. Right-click on the reservations and select New Reservation. Type the name of the device you want to make this reservation for, choose an IP address. It does not have to be in the distribution range we just created. Put the MAC address and description. I will create a reservation for our Windows 11 VM. We can also choose if we want to use BootP, DHCP, or both protocols. BootP was designed for diskless devices to get the network location of their boot image. We do not use such devices on our network, but I will leave this option as is. And looks like I made a typo. Now we have a reservation, but it is inactive. Let's go to our Windows 11 VM and try to renew the address again. Looks like we got an error. Let's just reboot it. Okay, the VM is up. Let's check back in our DHCP snap-in. Click on Refresh. Now it is working properly. The old lease has disappeared and the new reservation we made is active now. Let's go to Scope Options. There are two different levels where you can configure DHCP options, global or server level and scope specific. Say you have multiple scopes and they all have the same basic DHCP options such as NTP or DNS server. You can configure that on the server level. And then you can configure other options like default gateway or static routes on the scope level. Next, we have policies. Policies allow you to specify custom IP address and option assignments for DHCP client based on a set of conditions. For example, you could create a policy that would give a different default gateway to the VoIP phones on your network based on a vendor class. This is a rather advanced topic and we will not discuss it here. The last thing we can configure is filters. In case you wanted to deny certain devices to obtain an IP address on your network, you would enable the deny filter and add those devices here using their MAC. Let's create a new filter to demonstrate this. Right-click on Deny and select New Filter. Put the MAC address of that device and brief description. Now you see this new filter with a red X, meaning the device with the MAC address we entered will not be able to get an IP address from this DHCP server. The only thing left to do is to actually enable this filter. Right-click on the Deny folder and select Enable. In case you had a very sensitive network with only few devices allowed to obtain an IP address from the DHCP, you would use the Allow filter and add the MACs of all those devices there, so no other device can be serviced by your DHCP server. I personally have never seen this being used in the real world. It is very strict and you would probably implement a different security measure against unauthorized access. Now we have a fully working DHCP server on our network, and this concludes our lesson along with the course. If you run a larger environment, you can build a DHCP cluster providing fault tolerance. At my company we have a cluster of 2 DHCP servers providing IP address to dozens of different subnets. The knowledge you gained here should allow you to set up a Windows environment for a small office. Thank you very much and good luck in your endeavors.